This video, we are going to cover how to vibe code a faction extension. If you don't know what a faction extension is, these are modules that you can install inside a faction that allow you to extend its functionality in ways that are specific to your needs. You can do things like include your own application inventory in a faction. You can integrate with external vulnerability tracking systems. You can even add custom graphics to your reports. So let's get into it. If you go to our GitHub repository, you can actually see a list of extensions we currently support. For this demonstration, we are going to actually take one of our existing extensions and use vibe coding to make it do something totally different. And we are going to take this JIRA extension, and what this JIRA extension does is when you're doing a penetration test, you've added your vulnerabilities to the assessment, and you finalize that assessment. The minute you finalize it, it takes all your criticals and highs and creates JIRA tickets out of them. Pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is clone this and tell AI to, instead of sending the issues to JIRA, to send it to GitHub. All right, so let's clone this repository. And what I'm going to do now is to make it clear, I'm going to change the name from faction JIRA extension to faction GitHub Issues extension. And then we're going to open it in VS Code. For this demonstration, we are going to close Copilot. We don't need it for what we're going to do. We are actually going to use another AI assistant called RuCode. RuCode is a typical AI assistant that has lots of different personalities, or they call these modes. These different modes will perform certain tasks based on what their persona is. So for instance, the architect will help you plan and ideate on requirements, create tech stacks, things like that. Coder does all the coding, debugging. You get the idea. They're pretty aptly named for their function. Because this project is not that difficult, we're just going to keep with the coding mode. If I was going to start a project from scratch, I would then probably start with the architect and ideate on requirements and all of those kind of things. The next thing is to tell Ru to specify the LLM we want to use. It supports all of the common LLMs out there. It even supports LM Studio. So if you wanted to run these models all locally, you can do that, which I think is actually pretty cool. But for now, I'm just going to use Anthropic, and I'm going to use the Claude Opus 4 model for now. Before we do any vibe coding, let's take a look at what this extension does. If we open up the project and go to the JiraPlugin class, we will see that this extends the assessment manager and overrides the function assessment change. What's happening in the background is when this module is loaded in a faction, anytime there's a change to the assessment, we will run these code blocks. For this extension, very specifically, we want to only run this code block when the operation is finalized. So you've just completed your penetration test, you have a bunch of vulns, now you are ready to finalize the assessment, close it out. The minute you hit finalize, it's going to run this function block here and send all the vulnerabilities to JIRA. Okay, now let's start with some basic prompting. What I've done is I've given the LLM a goal. We're going to change the JIRA plugin to a GitHub Issues plugin. We are going to tell it that we only want to send criticals and highs. And I'm being specific here in letting it know how to convert criticals and highs because faction uses numeric values for these severities, and I want to make sure the LLM can understand that and do this accurately. The next thing is I'm telling it what to send as GitHub issues. We're going to use descriptions, recommendations, and details. The rest is more setup to make sure it knows how to find things like how to get the GitHub token, how to get the repo information, and then just other things that it should do while it's looking at the code base. Like we're going to change the name of this plugin, we're going to make sure we update the descriptions, and we're going to update the POM files. Some of these things you might not be familiar with yet about what descriptions MD does and exactly what the POM file does with relationships to these extensions. Don't worry, I'm going to do another video that goes really in depth in how to build a faction extension, but for this video, we're just going to let the LLM do all of the work. So with that said, let's just see what happens. Let's take this in. Let's go over to Ru code and let's execute it. This part is going to take a few minutes to run through, but what's going to happen is it's going to start looking at the code base. Based on what the requirements I gave it, it will start making changes to the code base, and it will create a to-do list of items that it needs to complete to ensure that it reaches the goal. So in a few seconds, it will actually start to populate that to-do list up here at the top. So let's let that cook for a bit. Yep, and now we have, looks like it came up with 6 tasks that it needs to complete. All right, now it's done. Let's see if it will actually build. And build success. First try, that's awesome. Okay, let's now try to install it inside of Faction. All right, great. It loaded successfully. We can now install it. And now the last thing we need to do is enable it. Now that it's enabled, you can see that we were able to update the description to talk about this being a GitHub instead of a JIRA extension. Wasn't able to get the image transitioned, but I think we're okay with that. Give some brief descriptions about how to use this, and then it added our settings for our GitHub token. So let me enter that really quick and save it. Now we're ready to create an assessment and try this out. So let's go to scheduling. Let's call this vibe code demo. Here, I'm going to add myself to the assessment. Now I need to provide the GitHub repo information. That is going to be, if we're here, it would be this section. Let's see, go back to here. There, okay. All right, save that. Okay, so now I have an assessment. I'm gonna go ahead and add some vulnerabilities, a mixture to see if we're only recording the criticals and highs. So I'm gonna add some SQL injection. Then I'm gonna add some cross-site scripting. And let's make this SQL injection a critical. And then let's add one more finding that is something like Self-signed certificate, and let's have that as a medium severity issue. Okay, our assessment should have our, oh, sure that is spelled correctly. Looks like we didn't copy the F. That's fine. Fix that now. Okay, if everything works as expected, we should, as soon as I finalize this assessment, we should see 2 issues. Yep, confirm we want to do that. Good, all right. Let's go over here, let's refresh. And it looks like I have 2 issues. It's taken GitHub a minute to show them. Yep, look at that. We did it. With just a few lines of text, we were able to completely integrate with GitHub, and it was able to take our descriptions and recommendations. And I like that it even took some liberty and added the overall severity, the impact, the likelihood. I like that it added these tags without me even asking it to. That was a really cool feature. All right, I think that worked out really well. You can see how powerful faction extensions are, and I hope it gives you some ideas how you can use faction extensions to automate your workflows. If you have an idea for an extension you would like us to add, please leave a comment below. Or if you have an extension you're working on and you'd like us to include it in our list of approved extensions, we'd love to know about it. So thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.